Chapter 21. Clowned. Ori helps himself to the area, stealing shards, ammunition, drugs, and whatever else the targets had on them. He'd even clept a sturdy, if bloody, synth leather jacket that was only marred with a couple bullet holes. After everything's cleaned up, Ori turns his attention to Max, who was having a cig off at the side. Hey, what do we do with that? He points at the remaining workable vehicle, one that hadn't taken all that much damage despite everything. Max shrugs. Usually we just leave him, not worth the hassle. He continues upon spotting Ori's confused face. Anything those guys did in that car, you'll have done if you're seen driving it around. Something like that bucket of scrap ain't worth the risk. Why? You thinking of taking it as your own?
Hornos, yeah?
Need something other than carts to get around. I won't always get partners willing to drive me around on jobs. That's so? Max idly questions, flicking the cig away as he walks over to the car. A Thornton G240, I think. Hard to tell under all this paint. He stomps down on the rear license plate, breaking it off. I've got some spray paints in the back of my ride. Paint this gang shit over and remove any identification and it'll do. Just don't drive it aside of Watson and Kabuki. NCPD might actually give a shit if you do. Ori stops rubbing his now thoroughly itching arm and grins. You sure? Thanks. The vat sniffs and goes for another cig. Don't mention it. I mean it. If the cops ask, I was never here. Smoke, he offers. Yeah. Ori relents. Been a while since he had one thanks to the bots, and he was sure they'd not try to mess with him now that they'd had a chat. Max lights their cigs up and click a button on his keys, causing his car to drive into the lot on its own. 6 should be finished talking, pics of these guys' faces. Let's get this finished. You should get that arm looked at too. Ori brings the G240 to a shuddering halt outside his and Bat's apartment before sheepishly getting out. He may have overestimated his driving abilities somewhat. Driving around a lot with his dad in the passenger seat was very different to playing chicken with the road-raging assholes and crazy gang members around Kabuki. He'd almost driven into people on the sidewalk multiple times, and he wasn't helped by one of his car's tires being shredded by grenade shrapnel, only making the thing more unwieldy. He'd only noticed this problem after he'd spray-painted the car completely black to cover up the gang symbols. Whatever. Wheels are wheels, no matter how fucked up they are. He unwraps the bloody bandages around his arm as he steps into the apartment, picking out the flattened lead bullets now protruding from his new healthy, if somewhat pale, skin. The bots were getting more efficient. Must be their new knowledge of the human anatomy. Speaking of which, he tosses his new weapon and bag of goodies to the side and drops into the couch. Collective, what changes have you made to my brain? No permanent modification have yet been made. Alteration required for suggested modification to host. Flesh Administrator. How much of my body does the collective have access to? Host integration is at 95%. Placements in cerebral cortex, occipital lobe, amygdala, and thalamus require utmost precision. Strange. I don't remember including such in-depth info. Duh. Mind control bots. He mutters to himself. Of course, they'd have a categoric understanding and comprehension of that aspect of human physiology. They were literally designed for it. I forbid any permanent changes from being made to my brain. Anything at all needs my express permission first, he quickly states. Modifying his body was one thing, but allowing them to mess with what made him was a terrifying prospect. From what he knew, one slight deviation from something seemingly inconsequential could drastically alter his personality. If he was in his right mind during the firefight, he wouldn't have allowed the bots to manipulate his emotions so easily. Permission request, ability to alter brain structure essential for most modifications. Flesh Administrator. Too bad, just focus on the body. He sharply responds but pauses at the sound of a beep, a message appearing at the corner of his vision. Hey buddy, some problems? Got a moment? Spectrum. Change ID to Specs. He mentally commands. Problems?
Oi.
XDXD, you are not going to believe this, but you 3 actually missed a guy. Specs. That ain't fucking funny. Where's my cash? Ori quickly texts back. Wheel, the client refuses to pay unless you finish the job. But good news. The guy should be his Kabuki market right now. So, if you could, please, pretty please. Specs. What about the others?
Oi.
Well, XD, you know how they are. Didn't want to bother them with something like this. Specs. You mean you're too shit scared of them to break the bad news?
Oi.
XD, you are too funny, my chum. But RLY, could you please? They'll pay you 5% extra for my part. Please. Specs. Ori rubs his face in thought. The job earlier had been stupidly easy thanks to Max and 6. Without them, he was cautious of stepping out of line. He didn't know if they'd take it as an insult if he finished the job without them. Not to mention if he could even do it in the first place. At least he had an actual weapon now though, right? Tell me where the guy is and I'll think about it.
Oi.
He's sharing drinks at the stall next BJ's Meat and Burger, Should be able to just cruise by, gun him down, and delta away with no problem. Specs. He actually knew where that was. Not far at all from his apartment, actually. But he wasn't willing to waste his new vehicle on it, especially with how close it was. His car was pretty conspicuous and would get noticed pretty quick by whoever wanted to retaliate.
10% or.
Done. Just kill that guy and we good. Go. Get him before he leaves. TYDYDYDY. Specs. Douchebag. Ori palms his face. Chapter 22. The One Who Knocks. Ori slinks through Kabuki Market with a hood pulled over his head. His new M221 Saratoga hidden inconspicuously under his new jacket. It was late in the afternoon and the sky was dimming, allowing the many lights of the market to illuminate the area. It was actually busier at this time than at any point in the day, everyone coming out to drink, fuck, or fight. He was already wearing the Scav hollow mask, but he hadn't activated it yet to avoid early detection. He continues along the Kabuki roundabout until he spots the dimly lit sign of BJ's Meat and Burger. Unfortunately for them, they'd probably have to shut down for tonight after Ori was done with the target. Specs had thankfully sent a picture of the guy he had to off, some Asian-looking dude called Yang with minimal visible cyberwear, a colorful shirt, and tracksuit bottoms. There were a couple stalls around BJ's, but it wasn't hard to spot his target, drinking in the middle of a group of his friends, loudly speaking on various subjects, most of which he didn't seem to have a clue about. I told her, "Woman, if you think you can find better than me, go ahead. Show them your flabby ass and fake tits. I do not give a fussy K." The man boisterously remarks as his buddies laugh along. He takes a deep drink of his beer. And guess what? 10 minutes later I see the whore walking out of the bar with 2 guys. I mean, what the hell is that? Sure, she had enough meat for 3 or more men, but goddamn. Ori steps closer, but gets a message from the nanites. Permission request emotional suppression, heart rate increased, stress response rising. Flesh administrator.
No.
I'll do it on my own. Ori whispers under his breath, determined to not become completely reliant on the bots. If he needed them to fuck with his brain just to stop him from having a mental breakdown, he was already too far gone. Just shows you datin' out of your league, Yang. Yang shakes his head and laughs. No way. Just that all you bozos have such low standards. He looks to the stall over and slides the beer away. Boss man. Another dare dash. He's interrupted as Ori steps behind him, however. The Scav mask active and showing a crackling, smiling face with X's for eyes. Yo, what the foo dash? One of Yang's friends exclaims, just as Ori pulls his M221 submachine gun out of his jacket and opens fire. Daga gaga 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 ga. Yang's body instantly slumps forward as bullets shred his body. All of his friends instantly flee, and the only one who stays is the stall owner who'd thrown himself to the ground. Ori keeps firing until he'd expended his entire magazine. He steps back with heavy breaths and almost forgets to take a picture before running away, ducking into a nearby alleyway to find a quiet place to hide. IMG sent. Job's done. Now I want my pay.
Oi.
Yeah, BOI. Good shit, good shit. Let me just confirm with the client, and we be primo. Specs. Ori looks down at himself, and his clothes still spattered with the man's blood. Sorry, bud. It was you or me. He disingenuously mutters while taking the chance to reload his weapon. EY. Sue. Bad news, Specs. You tell me that was the wrong guy, and I'm coming for you, dumb bastard.
Oi.
No. Right guy, but client says we got one more to off. Specs. 10%. Is all Ori replies with. Tired of this fucking idiot fixer. Shit information, shit client, shit job. What? That leaves me with only 10% chum. Come on. Specs. You accept it, not for the job, but for Max and 6 to not find out. Get it, Ori?
Fine.
I thought we were chums, but wait, Tevs. Here's the guy's photo. He should be in his home at. Ori walks up the apartment stairs until he reaches the 3rd floor. The large hallway was thankfully empty as he approaches the 154th door and stands outside of it. He takes a deep breath and knocks on it a couple times. The door gets slid open by a teenage girl around Ori's age. Both just stare at each other in surprise. Him at her, and her at the holographic Scav mask. Jess? Who is it? A male voice calls from inside the apartment, drawing Ori's attention. That Darren? He questions, his voice modulated by the mask. Who's a skin? She shoots back, but whimpers when he retrieves his gun from inside his jacket.
I'm Eskin.
Answer. Why yeah, it is. D don't hurt me. I don't even like him that much, she quietly exclaims, running past Ori without even her shoes. Shaking his head, Ori steps inside and shuts the door behind him, walking into the living room where Darren was lying half naked across the couch, playing some retro video games on his TV. Who was it then, Jess dash? The blonde-haired man pauses when he spots Ori, eyes widening.
Yo.
I don't know who the fuck you are, but I can pay whatever you want. He falls off of his couch and hurriedly pushes himself away. I got Eddie's. Jay, just name your price. 10,000. W what? Dash, he starts but his objection trails off when Ori points his gun at his head. I don't have that kind of cash to throw around. F 5,000. I can give that. Fine. He pulls out a shard and tosses it to the man, not wanting the cash to get traced back to him. The man dutifully does as he's told and hands the shard back to him with a sheepish smile. So we good? Yeah, we go Dash.
Bang.
He shoots a hole into the guy's face. No point in ruining his reputation by showing kindness to some douchebag. If Ori had the time, he'd snoop around the apartment for anything to steal, but he imagined the NCPD or whoever the guy was affiliated with would be on their way. Ori makes it to the front door only to pause as he hears a commotion on the other side. A familiar female voice all but shrieking. In there. In there. He's gonna hurt Darren. Do something. He sighs. That's what he gets for showing mercy. He only hoped that Darren was worth sacrificing their lives for. Chapter 23. Struggle. Ori quickly locks the door with the press of a button and backs away into the living room where Darren's corpse still lay. Plan. He quickly murmurs to himself, trying to think of a way to deal with this without dying in the process. Who knew how many guys were outside? What or how many weapons they had? Knock knock. Open up and we'll only beat you. A gruff man's voice shouts as they begin slamming the door, trying to get in. His eyes dart around the apartment a few more times, spotting a few things of interest and nodding to himself. A workable plan coming to fruition. He steps to the hollow emitter that was projecting screens that float in midair, broadcasting various advertisements and TV shows. He tears it out of its foundation, making sure to not disturb the wiring, and places it next to the front door, allowing the screen to obscure it like distorted glass. He then bundles some of Darren's sheets and blankets together to form a makeshift sheet rope, tying it around the corpse's neck and hanging it from one of the lights, allowing to stand in the apartment entrance. With that done, he fishes out Darren's holophone and accesses its database, retrieving some voicemails he'd sent out and put them on a loop, causing the man's voice to fill the apartment. By the time the strangers had broken down the apartment door, Ori had set himself up, lying prone in a corner overlooking the entrance, Darren's body swaying not far beside him. Thud. Darren? Where the F dash, one of the men shouted as the dust from the door clears, but they could only see a humanoid silhouette through the hollow emitter's holograms. Darren's voice was the only thing preventing him and his friends from opening fire, at least, until Ori began. Daga gaga. Ori's submachine gun screams as he begins spraying bullets at the entrance, blasting anything and everything around it. Neither the doorframe nor the people inside it were spared, 3 people instantly dropping dead from the gunfire, judging by their falling silhouettes through the holograms. The strangers open fire too, aiming at the obviously placed person standing in the front entrance. Darren's body takes the full front of it, every hit causing the corpse to sway and shudder as bullets rip through it. Blood spatters and covers apartment behind the body, but the strangers didn't stop, unaware of what they were shooting at. Ori reloads and begins firing again. His adrenaline was pumping hard, his breathing erratic as he occasionally made a hard sniff and breathed in the gunpowder. Click, click, click. His eyes widen, realizing he was out of ammo. He didn't have any more clips left for his gun. Fuck. He curses under his breath and rolls to the side, out of view of the entrance. Fucking queuing. This bastard needs to die. Killing my guys? I'll tear his fucking chrome out. One enraged man exclaims, stomping through the hollow emitter now that the gunfire had stopped. What the fuck? He shouts, finally seeing just what they were shooting at. Darren's corpse bleeding profusely above the rapidly growing puddle underneath it. Sick fuck. Where are you? I'll fucking end you. Ori quietly places his weapon down at his side and reaches for the kitchen knife, his only remaining weapon, when the large, well-built man steps past the corner Ori acts, leaping at him and bringing the knife down at his neck. Clank, only for it to come to a shuddering halt as it fails to pierce the metal cyberware guarding the man's neck. His arm is gripped tightly as the man lowers his face to get a better look at him. You little dash. Ori growls and headbutts him, causing his scav holomask to crack, spark, and fail upon contact. That doesn't let go even then, however. The bald man grins toothily, revealing his set of metal teeth. A kid. A kid did all this? He seethes. Shouldn't you know not to play adult games? Fuck you. Ori spits, sending a globule of saliva at the man's eye, who doesn't blink at all in response. Good. I like a screamer, he states before sending a punch into Ori's face, the force of which sends him toppling head over toe into the nearby wall, crashing with a hard thud. Ark! Ori shouts with a pained grunt, raising his head from where he was laying, only to realize that one of his eyes wasn't opening. Permission request dash.
Jotust do it.
Ori whispers with a choked cough, feeling blood beginning to pool in his mouth. At that he feels a wave of energy wash through him, the pain fading as his muscles swelled. His eyes contracted into pinpricks as everything seemingly slowed down. Ori grabs at anything next to him, thankfully gripping a long piece of metal that had come off when he'd slammed into a metal shelf. Still got fight and dash. The man starts but gets interrupted as Ori almost manically throws himself to his feet and slams the makeshift weapon into his head. Clack. I ain't going down 2-0 gonk fucking chrome jock, he roars as he hits the mini another 2 times. The man's head twists with each hit, whipping to the sides as he takes them head-on. Seeing this method of attack fail completely, Ori lowers himself and leaps forward to try and stab the metal fixing into the man's eye, only to get slapped out of the air with ease. His makeshift weapon goes flying as he rolls towards the exit, his pain flaring despite the efforts of the nanites. We're gonna be good friends, you and I, the man leers as he steps towards him. You killed my guys, so you're gonna be my new brother, he says as reaches for him. Ori shuffles backwards, his single remaining eye shooting to the door where the man's friends presumably lay, along with their weapons. With a huff, he throws himself out, landing atop a bullet-ridden corpse and snatching up the closest gun, a nearby pistol. The adrenaline pumping through his system, while good for physical tasks, caused his hands to tremble as he aimed at the man. Regardless, he fired anyway, despite his aim not being optimal.
Bang, bang, bang.
Chapter 24. Borgud.
Bang, bang, bang.
Clank, clank, clank. The bullets ricochet off of the man's chrome as he speeds up his pace towards Ori. Haha, you think that's enough to beat me? Come quietly now and I'll be gentle. Ori gets off another few useless shots when the man finally reaches him, kicking him in the stomach hard enough to throw him directly into the ceiling. He hits it with a crack, and then falls to the ground in a heap, groaning as he barely keeps his grip on the pistol. Permission request. Dio it. He growls, pushing himself off his stomach and coughing out a worrying amount of blood. Abruptly his vision blurs and crackles, somehow becoming distant to his own eyes, as if the back of his eyes were screens that he was watching from the inside of his skull. Not to mention, he lost all feeling to his body. He panicked but wasn't able to do anything as his body began moving of its own volition, standing upright stiffly and rigidly turning its head towards the chrome jock. The man pauses his approach and tilts his head at the odd movements. You finally lost it, or something, kid, except in my off dash.
Bang.
Ori's body raises the gun and fires a shot straight into the man's eye, causing him to reel back with an agonized shout. Structural weaknesses, eyes, nasal cavity, mouth, cybernetic obstruction. His mouth states on its own, the nanites speaking through him. The man scowls and looks back at him, one of his eyes sparking from the bullet it had taken, the cybernetic piece clearly irreparable. That's it, you're fucking dead. Negative. The nanites respond and open fire again. The man covers his good eye with his arm, but the bullets just hit him in the mouth and nose instead. The man is forced to swallow some of his metal teeth as the bullets hit his lip and dislodge them, but the worst damage is to his nose. The bullets shattered his unenhanced nasal cavity and continue dealing horrific damage to everything else. A wave of extreme nausea and vertigo hits the man, stopping his stride and causing him to slowly topple to one side. Ark, what the fuck did you do to me? The man shouts as blood streams down his nose, ears, and mouth. The nanites don't respond, robotically walking past the man and stiffly picking up a shotgun one of his buddies had dropped. They then simply walk back over, stand over the man, and blow his head off, the stopping power at point-blank range being enough to breach the man's protections. Protocol SD-2552 executed. Objective complete. Returning control of host system administrator. His body reports out loud before slumping to the floor, Ori gasping for air when all of his senses hit him at once. He was stunned, the feeling of losing complete control still bearing down on him like a cancer diagnosis. An existential threat and fear. He releases a shuddering breath and forces himself to his feet, only now noticing the few eyes peeking out from their apartment doors, watching him. He pulls his hood down, ignoring the twinge of pain from his aching arm muscles, the nanites having strained his body earlier. Ori shakes his head, removing the thoughts of looting the chrome jock's corpse or anything else. The NCPD were probably on their way now, and he couldn't risk any more fights, especially in his current condition. He takes a photo of Darren's mutilated corpse, picks up his SMG, and also slings the shotgun the nanites had used to kill that bastard over his shoulder. If one thing was for certain, he wasn't risking fighting another guy like him without a shitload of stopping power. With that, he departs, quickly fleeing the scene. An hour and a half later, Ori finally reaches his apartment, stumbling through the door and somehow reaching and falling into his bed. Inwardly, he was still freaking out about the nanites momentarily taking control, the feeling of helplessness he experienced just making him even more paranoid. Then the deaths hit him, memories of Darren's obliterated corpse, the bloody bodies strewn around the apartment door. He gags and almost vomits onto the floor next to the bed, but manages to hold it in. He sweats profusely, pain and panic intermingling. He's only brought out of his funk when hears the beep, indicating a received text. That job done yet? Choom.
Specs.
Ori looks down at himself and strips off the blood-covered jacket, along with everything else, leaving him lying on the bed moistened with his own sweat. IMG sent. Done. Now I want my money.
Oi.
Fuck. What did you do to that poor guy? Hang him like a piñata and shoot him for fun?
You are crazy, dude.
Specs texts back when he receives the picture of Darren's corpse, the gory sight drawing a big reaction. Eddie's.
Oi.
Hey man, look. The client. Ori doesn't even read the rest of the text, gritting his teeth and shooting one back. I will fuck you up. Where's my money?
Oi.
The client man refuses to pay unless we do one more. Specs. Fucking rat piece of scop shit. Ori seethes. This useless fucking fixer thinks he can fuck with him? Muksh. We got a problem. You awake?
Oi.
Yeah. This better be good though. Muksh. Specs is fucking us. Had me go 2 more dudes for the client without any pay. Almost died doing it. Wants to go for a third.
Oi.
Man, you're green, kid. Shoulda just waited a day for the client to pay. Call the guy's bluff. Since you already went and did it, he thinks he can milk us for all we're worth. Now we've actually got to do something. Max. What? So this is my fault. Not Specs. Ori angrily texts back, immediately regretting it after the fact. Don't you start. It's the fixer's fault, sure, but you coulda asked me or Six what's what. We know a lot more about this shit than you do. Max. Yeah, what now then? I'm fucked up and need the cash. I ain't letting some douchebag rinse us.
Oi.
I'll look into it, make a few calls, have a word with our fixer. You rest up, kid. We'll probs be busy tomorrow. Muksh. Ori slumps against the bed, grimacing as he feels his ribs pull themselves back into place. The Nanite's getting to work collecting the bone shards and piecing them together like a puzzle. He brings a hand up to his swollen over eye but quickly pulls it away as a stabbing pain hits. Ugh. Fuck everything about today. He mutters, giving in to his exhaustion and falling asleep. Chapter 25. Decisions.
Beep beep. Beep beep.
Ori blearily awakens to his holophone beeping. He grumbles about it for a couple moments before eventually relenting, staring up at the ceiling and looking towards the notification that appears in the corner of his vision. Kid, we're sorting this out. Meet us at the waterfront east of Bellevue overpass, Max.
Ki. Oi.
He's about to roll out of bed when he finally notices the couple machines connected to him via a tube in his arm and some wiring in his interface port. Bats must have noticed his state and sorted him out. Least he wasn't feeling like complete shit like he'd been expecting. Nanites were working overtime. System report: increased density and count of adipocytes, increased efficiency of gastric acids, increased acidity, increased acid resistance of stomach lining, digestive tract reinforced. Process of cultivating beneficial microorganisms started. Flesh administrator. He crooks a brow at that. Yeah, that's not gonna make me forget the body takeover, saving my life or not. He thumbs his temple, feeling a headache that was undoubtedly caused by whatever the Nanites had done yesterday. What exactly is adipocytes? He questions. Fat, energy storage cells. Increased potential energy reserves without stunting dexterity or flexibility. Flesh administrator. He disconnects the tubing from his arm and slides out of bed, heading into the bathroom and checking the mirror. Yep, just like he thought, he was back to his gaunt look again. He wasn't sure if the Nanites used all of his fat cells for those upgrades, or if his fat was just too dense to be visible like it had yesterday. Thankfully, his eye wasn't fucked up anymore. He checks it for a bit before nodding in satisfaction, happy there wasn't any permanent damage. He wasn't willing to risk testing the Nanites' effectiveness in healing such a delicate organ as an eye. They were already programmed to fuck with the brain, but the eye? He doubted it. Collective request: increased iron intake for Nanite replication. Flesh administrator. Yeah, I'll eat more spinach or whatever. Couldn't I just swallow iron shaving or something though? Collective unable to manually process metals, requires other technology. Flesh administrator. Well, you're in my blood, right? Couldn't I just bleed on something and have you deconstruct it? Protocols 2415-2, JM 2152, DFG 2141-32, AR001 prohibit external action from host. NMN injector required. Flesh administrator. NMN injector? His memory flashes back to the crazy old man and the knife he'd stabbed him with. Was that what he needed to make full use of the Nanites? Do you know what the injector looks like? Negative. Well, that just adds another reason to find that old bastard. An hour later, Ori arrives at the destination Max had given. He steps out of his car with his new shotgun slung over his shoulder and the hollow mask bats had stolen from the Scav Ripper shop, since his was now broken. He spots Max and Six standing next to a pillar, holding up the bridge above them. Next to that was a man chained to a concrete bench. Specs.
Oi.
Yo fichum.
Hey, tell these two they got the W wrong guy. The fixer stutters out, his face bruised and bloody. We already got what we needed out of him, Max explains with crossed arms. Decided that it was best that you decide what to do with him. You know, since he fucked you over first, he says, and Six nods, almost encouragingly. You look like shit, by the way. Ori's throat goes dry as he approaches. This wasn't what he was expecting at all. Not that he was complaining about their efficiency, but, you know the client? Machnoch, yeah. Which is kinda a problem. It's a suit, a corpo asshole, one that'll have a shitload of security. He sighs and ruffles his own hair irritably. You sure know to pick him? Hey, a job's a job. Why, you should be thanking me for getting us this opportunity. Spec struggles in his chair. A fixer is meant to pick the shit jobs out before handing him out. You're lucky I've thought of a way to handle this. He growls at the chained man. Ori perks up. You do? Yeah, but it's a long shot. I'll give you the choice, kid. If we ditch this and forget about it, or pursue it and potentially get fucked in the process. We're doing it.
Ori instantly answers.
He refused to have his first job go like this. It had just set a bad precedent in his mind for the rest of his merc career. Aight, here's the sitch. The guys we've been flatlining? The buddies of our client, Cleveland Fabrosi's kid. He states, causing Ori's eyes to widen. Don't know why, don't care. All you need to know is that this gives us some options. Before I was thinking, we just take the guy and his son hostage for the Eddie's owed. But now we can actually gain more. We'll contact Quentin Fabrosi and let him know what Daddy Dearest has been up to. I'll be my legs, he'll go apes hit. His dad hired us to do the dirty work for a reason after all. We'll have his kid hire us to off him. Use his inheritance to pay us what we're owed. Understand? Won't he be pissed off that we killed his friends? Ori questions. It sounded like a plan doomed to failure. Max grins. Well, as far as he knows, we're just some guys who discovered this all after killing some mercs and their fixer. He sends a glance at Specs. W what? No way that'll work. Besides, I used my real name in that transaction, and I won't give it up. I'd rather die. Specs blurts out, squirming harder in his restraints. I'll be sure to write that on your grave, Alan. The fixer pales at that. What? I find dirt on everything I work with. He gestures at Six. Him. You. Only person I can't find shit on is the kid, which makes sense given how green he is. Specs, or better yet. Alan turns towards Ori with a pleading look. W, we're good, aren't we? You don't want to kill the guy who gave you your first job, right? Max and Six watch intently as Ori looks at the ground in thought. His face was neutral, but his eyes displayed clear conflict. But this cleared rather quickly as he takes a deep, calming breath. What do we need from him? We need proof, right? The merc duo grin. Six far more subdued than Max. Depends. NCPD uses facial ID and fingerprints if they haven't been scrubbed off or chromed over. What do you think Quentin would prefer? Ori wets his lips while tentatively pulling the kitchen knife from his side. Something he'd recognize, the head of the man responsible. Attaboy. And no.
No.
Please no.